May I speak in the hope that we hear the Lord. Amen. Please be seated. In the year 2009, the medieval babes were booked to play at a private function in Beirut. We arrived in the country and were escorted to this beautiful beach resort on a glorious sunny day. We were treated to a free bar, endless delicious food, belly dancers, and a male escort who offered us his full attention. There's a longer story about that, but I won't tell that today. We played the show to an audience of wealthy people who were celebrating an English-style May Day festival, and then we spent a comfortable night in the five-star hotel. 12 hours later, we found ourselves locked up in a prison cell, our belongings and passports confiscated, surrounded by heavily armed police. How did this happen? Was I arrested for throwing the TV out of the hotel window in true rock and roll style? Was it drugs or drunken debauchery? Sadly, it was none of these things. In the simple act of applying for a visa to fly home, we'd been locked up by the local police captain who required a significant gift in order to authorize our departure. My fellow performers were becoming increasingly distressed, and as the band's designated adult, I tried to calm them, whilst my own heart was pounding in my chest with a growing sense of claustrophobia and fear. Through the iron bars of the prison cell, I watched our lawyer grovel and plead with the captain, whilst an appropriate sum of money for our release and the correct paperwork was negotiated. As the wedge of cash offered grew fatter and fatter, I wondered what price our freedom would cost and whether we would ever make it home. Eventually, we were loaded into a minivan and driven to a remote car park which was surrounded by concrete walls, all perforated by bullet holes. Our representative assured us that this was the normal proceeding in such matters, and that the captain had been very generous with his dealings because we were all so pretty. Our passports and belongings were handed back to us, and we were free to fly home. This is the only experience I've ever had of being incarcerated, but I can tell you it was a really nerve-wracking experience that left me with little doubt that I wouldn't be returning to Lebanon anytime soon. In today's reading from Acts, we hear at the beginning of a slave girl who has the gift of second sight. Her owners have been making a fortune out of her talents, and because of this, she is a valuable commodity. We live in a world where it appears that human beings are no longer valued for themselves, for the beautiful, complex creatures that God has made us all to be, but for our spending power, our addictive natures, our vulnerability to the latest fad. We are all susceptible to being enslaved by consumerism and lifestyle. In a recent survey done by Microsoft, it showed that the average attention span of a human being is 8 seconds. This has fallen from 12 seconds in the last 10 years due to the widening use of smartphones. We have become so enslaved by those little computers in our pockets that we are prepared to sacrifice our mental agility. In the former parish that I worked at, St John's West Hendon, the incumbent Julia Candy told us a story about when she had worked as a hospital chaplain. A middle-aged woman who was gravely ill with cancer confided in her that she had been lured to the UK with the promise of work in a shop. Struggling to feed her family, she jumped at the chance. When she arrived in London, she found that she had been sold as a domestic slave to a family. This family insisted that she work for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, cooking, cleaning, and caring for the young children. After 8 years without pay, unable to contact her children at home, she became extremely unwell and was physically unable to work anymore. The family threw her out into the streets, where she was found and brought to hospital. Too ill to be able to travel home to see her children one last time, and too frightened to tell Julia who this family was, she died in hospital just a few weeks later. On hearing this story, my overriding emotion was fury, a blind fury that justice would never be done, and that family probably went on to lure and trap another person, stealing their life. Whilst slavery still exists in this world, none of us can truly ever be free. The path to freedom is not a straight one. It's not an easy one. Albert Camus, the Algerian-born French philosopher and Nobel Prize winner, understood that when he said, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." And as those who have already chosen to live our lives as an act of rebellion, following the rebel Jesus Christ, we all know that the battle for freedom is not a personal quest, but something that is done together. For if one person is enslaved, then we are all slaves. The work that Christ did on the cross is the work of a person laboring for the freedom of all. And as a church, we are called to labor in that same way. This week, we joined with our neighbouring church, St. Mark's, to celebrate the Ascension of Christ. And it occurred to me that we don't really focus on the Ascension in the same way that we do with the other parts of Jesus' story. The mind-blowing moment when the risen Christ leaves the world to ascend into a new realm, a new heaven, and to intercede for us forever. Wow, that's something I'd really like to talk about more. If that isn't true freedom, then I don't know what is. That Jesus continues to labour forever, freeing us from the slavery of sin. It seems to me that each step of the Jesus journey has been about freeing us. From the moment of his conception, his birth, his human life and ministry, his death, his resurrection and his ascension, all of it has been an attentional journey to break the chains that bind us to the human condition in order for us to ascend with him to that resting place with God, finally whole, finally home. Freedom only comes in unity with each other and with God. There is no freedom without the understanding that whilst the poorest of the world continue to suffer, whilst we allow corruption to reign unchecked throughout our ruling bodies, whilst we remain silent in the face of injustice, whilst God's creation is under the threat of destruction, and whilst war rages throughout the globe, we are all enslaved. The glory that you have given me, and I have given them, so that they may be one, as we are one, I in them and you in me. Today's gospel speaks of a true and profound freedom, one that is found in the complete union of all things. Friends, we are here because we love a Lord who leads us to freedom, and by reconciling ourselves to him through our high priest Jesus Christ, who even now at this very moment intercedes for us, we take one more step towards that finality. Today, Jesus invites us to his table in celebration of that gift. Amen.